Good Thursday morning to you. And because it's Thursday, we're going to draw some wisdom out of the book of Proverbs. But before we do, I want to tell you a little story within a story. One story you know pretty well, at least you know the title of it. It's called Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates. It was written by an American author back in the early 1900s, but it takes place in the Netherlands. And it's about a little boy and his sister who enter a competition, a skating competition, where the prize is a pair of silver skates. Very heartwarming story. But within that story, another story is told, which you probably know even better. Not the title, because the title is The Hero of Haarlem. But you know the story of a little boy who saved a village. In brief, it goes like this. A brother and his little brother went walking. They lived in a town in the Netherlands which was below the level of the sea. And so in order to protect the houses and the fields and the gardens and the people, they had built a large, thick wall called a dike to protect the village. And it kept the sea back. So one day, this boy and his little brother were walking far outside of the village to where there were no people, no houses, until finally the brother climbed up on the dike and sat for a rest. The little brother played down at the bottom. And finally he called up to his brother and he said, look at the bubble. Look at the bubble. And the older brother knew that that might be trouble if there was a bubble in the dike. And so he came down, and sure enough, there was a little bubble of water that was coming through the smallest hole in the dike. And he immediately realized that this could be a real problem. And so they didn't have time to race back to get help. So he decided to do this. He took his forefinger and he stuck it tightly inside the hole of the dike. And he told his little brother, he said, run just as fast as you can. And so his little brother ran to get help back to the village. And time went on and his finger began to get cold because it began to get cold, and the sun went down and still no one had come. And so finally his finger started to get numb, and the numbness ran up to his arm, and then finally his shoulder. He rested his head and his shoulder against the dike, and still no one was coming. He heard the lap, lap, lap of the sea on the other side. It was as though the sea was saying, I'm bigger than you. I will get you. You can't stop me. You're just a little boy. And so he got scared, and he thought about taking his finger out and running back, but he knew that he would put his whole village and his family at risk. And so he held his finger tightly in that hole, and his shoulder began to get sore. And then finally he heard voices. He looked, and sure enough, it was his family and neighbors and friends who were bringing pickaxes and tools and sand. And they ran up and they repaired the dike, and they put the little boy on their shoulders, and they marched back like an army into the village with the hero of Haarlem. It's a great story. Here's the scripture that relates to this. It's in Proverbs chapter 17. The beginning of strife is like the letting out of water, so quit before the quarrel starts. Quarrels, fights, are like a lot of things in our lives. They don't just happen. It's usually the end of a process, a chain of events. In my personal experience, it kind of goes like this. Someone does something or says something that hurts you. You, instead of dealing with it the right way, the healthy way, you allow that to kind of get in your brain, and it festers and it grows and it becomes anger, resentment. And then at exactly the wrong time, it spills out into words and actions, into a quarrel, into a fight. There is a kind of a hole in a drip that goes on up here. And it's kind of like that hole in the dike. And the danger is the same as well. You endanger a relationship if you don't deal with it properly. So let me give you, from personal experience, a few tips on dealing with the drip. Tip number 1, talk it out or let it go. When someone does something or says something, go to that person, talk it out, tell them that it hurts you, and talk about it. You know, it may be the very first time that other person has even given it another thought. They may be totally oblivious to the things that you're stewing about. So talk it out, or another possibility, just let it go. Decide, you know, this is not a battle worth fighting. It wasn't that bad after all. Just let it go and move on. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2, look in the mirror. Or to use Jesus' words, take the log out of your eye so that you can see your faults and will see more clearly the faults of others. Look in the mirror because, you know what? What they said to you might be true. What was done to you might be well deserved. It's possible, isn't it, that you might be the one in the wrong and they might be in the right. Consider it. Look in the mirror. And then finally, be a peacemaker. Jesus spoke about this as well in the Beatitudes. He said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God." So once you've quit the quarrel in your own life and brought peace to that relationship, help others do the same for themselves, to practice these tips. Because the beginning of strife is like the letting out of water. Drip, drip, drip. Stop it. Quit before the quarrel breaks out. So I hope that helps. Have a wonderful Thursday. The Bible study is for you to view if you weren't able to make it. We had such a great time in the book of Jonah, learning so much from each other. So take it in. We'll see you on Sunday. God bless.